need to do a little work to get things set up to use our mannequin properly. So to begin, we'll open up our blueprints folder here. I'm actually going to, instead of creating a class real quick, instead of creating a subfolder real quick, I'm going to go ahead and do the blueprint class. I'm going to select a player controller. We will call this BP underscore player controller. Now, what this does is renames without the plus sign. What this does is so that the player controller essentially is your controller, right? It's what kind of takes whatever controls you're putting and puts it into the game and translates it to exactly what you're doing. And you can set up a bunch of different things within the player controller to really kind of open up the breadth of what you're doing. It's a little detailed. You can go into the UE4 docs if you're really interested in the detailed stuff. But the thing that I'm making this for is because there is a default one, but it's not exposed to us, so we can't actually, if we want to make any changes down the line, we can't actually do anything with that. So by making our own, it allows us to be able to go in here and we can make our own changes in our event graph if we need to, as well as any changes along the sides here for the actual controller stuff. So that is what it is. I'm going to dock this here so that when we open something new, it should hopefully dock there every time now. The other thing I actually want to do is make our game mode. So we'll do a blueprint class. We will do game mode. Do I want game mode base? Let me search for game mode real quick. No, we just want game mode. And we'll call this BP underscore game mode, of course. And the game mode is where the main set of rules for the game are included. This could be whether or not the game is paused, how pausing the game is handled, transitions between levels and number of maximum players allowed, that kind of stuff. For the most part for us, it's going to be to set the default classes, which will be in here, the default classes in our game, or at least on the specific levels and whatnot. So the default HUD class, which we have, HUD. The default player controller, which we actually just made. So let's go ahead and select our BP player controller there. I don't think we need to set up anything else yet because we don't yet have a player controller, we don't yet have a default pawn class, so we'll hold off on that. I'm going to compile this and save it. I was hoping that would dock, but it won't. So what we can do here now is we can actually go into our project settings under maps and modes. So you have a default mode. The default game mode is going to be this first person game mode. That's what's set up right now. And we're going to actually change this to our BP game mode. And this automatically updates all of these here, but you can override them. Similarly, in the world settings of whatever level you're in, you can override the whole game mode or individual parts of the game mode as well. So this currently has an override in it. We're going to remove that because we just want the default stuff. So also in the blueprints folder, we're going to go ahead and make that pawns folder again. Since it didn't save, we'll go ahead and make another folder here, and we've got the player pawn. So in here, we are going to go ahead and right click, create a new blueprint class, and we're going to do a character. And we are going to call this BP underscore human. This will be the parent class for all human characters we make, and everything we include here will be inherited to the child actor. To clarify that, I'll go ahead and right click and make a child blueprint class right now. And we'll call this BP underscore player character. So this child will actually hold the specifics of that character. So the skeletal mesh that makes up the way they look, the animation blueprint that drives their unique animations, any specifics about their stats that we may put in there. That's all stored and going to be stored within the child itself. Now, what gives us those initial stats in the first place and the ability to hold, well, I guess in one way, the ability to hold meshes and child meshes and things like that are going to be from the parent. So I've got the child opened up right now. Okay. And in fact, I'll go ahead and set this up now. Our player default pawn is going to be the player character. So now that's set in there. We'll compile, save that. We can close our game mode now. And if we look into even here, we have BP player controller and the BP player character automatically filled in. What we're doing is taking our first person character here, and we're going to go ahead and delete that. So that's not in there anymore. So with the child, you can see it's just a capsule component. This is actually, whenever you're playing a game, this is actually all your character is it's this capsule. You're just moving this capsule around, and it jumps and slides around and all that kind of stuff. And then you have a mesh associated with that, and that's where you can put in things like our mannequin. All right. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove that for the time being because I'm actually going to set some things up. This is also going to contain your character movement component, and that's where you can kind of set like the maximum walking speed, the jumps, all sorts of different stuff that you want to set up in here. So we'll compile, we'll save this, we'll come back and back into our pawns, our player pawn, our BP human, so this is our parent class, right? We're coming here, go ahead and save that as well. So this is where we're going to add some things. So there's a couple tricks that I need to do. The first thing is I'm going to actually add that mannequin mesh here and make sure everything's kind of turned on for snapping to make it a little easy for us. We'll switch over to rotate, which is up here. We'll rotate him around 90 degrees so he's facing forward. That's why they have this arrow component, which is it's kind of placed in a unusual position, if you ask me, but we won't question that too much. So what we need to do is I want to actually hover over this, highlight it by clicking on it. We're going to add a component. And when we add a component, utilizing, while we're selected on this, it's actually going to give us the option to, everything we add is going to be a child of that. I'm going to go ahead and add a camera. I'm going to go ahead and try to spell camera correctly. And we're just going to have a regular camera there, and you can see it's indented in. That's because it is a child of that. We're going to call this FPS_camera. So this is going to be our first person camera. And the reason we're adding this as a child of the mesh is because we're going to come over here on the right in the parent socket. We're going to go ahead and do a search. We're actually going to socket this to the head. And what that means is it is going to attach itself to the head bone in here, and it's going to follow that no matter what, which is pretty cool. So we obviously need to do a couple things with it now. We're going to go ahead and rotate this 90 degrees so it's that way, and then we need to move it so it's centered up there. I'm not going to turn off snapping so I can kind of get a little finer tune control on the translation of it. So we're going to have this come out right there. So this is kind of coming out of the nose, mouth area, and that's fine because in a first-person view, you kind of want that a little lower than where the actual eyes are, just because it makes it easier to see any items you're holding in your hand without having to look down and look at them that way. Especially once you get into animations and stuff, it's a little wonky. So everything else is fine on that. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually highlight the capsule component. We're going to add a component. This is going to be a spring arm. And a spring arm is, well, we're going to name it what it really is. We're going to name it camera boom, because this is essentially going to have a camera attached to the end of it, and that camera is going to be our third person camera. So now with the camera boom selected here, we're going to add another component, and it's going to be another camera, and we're going to name that third person camera. Now to make this in a position that we want it to actually be in, as far as a kind of an over the shoulder closer third person view, which I will be setting up a change camera view option where we can kind of move it around to a further view, or maybe left shoulder, right shoulder, depending on how people feel they want to play. That's all going to be a thing that they can do. So with the camera boom, because we don't want to move just the camera itself, we want to move the camera boom itself. The positions that I've played around with that I know that I really like to have these, I'm going to add the camera boom z-axis here to a 48.5. That moves it right up kind of on the chest there. So that's kind of where the pivot point is going to be. So if you rotate if you're in third person, you rotate your camera around your character, it's going to pivot around their chest now instead of their waist, their pelvis, and that's what we want there. And then to actually kind of adjust the camera up and over a little bit, we're going to do a socket offset on that. And the y-axis, which is your green here, as you can see down in the bottom corner, you can see what those always are. On the y-axis, we are going to set that to, what did I do here, 50, positive 50, so it goes to the right. If you want it to go to the left, you do a negative 50. And then for the z-axis, we're going to do a 30 in the positive as well. That lifts it up a little bit more. That's kind of where that's going to go. Now the actual target arm length, I'm going to knock that down to 200 by default, and that's going to give us a nice sort of closer view there. Now one thing we definitely want to do is we want to make sure that this camera is enabled by default. And we do that, oh, we got to select the actual camera for that. That makes sense. So that is going to be, also one of these needs to use pawn control rotation. I think it's this one. I'll check that here in a second. Why am I not seeing this here? Auto activate. Okay, so that one's good. And then we want to select this one and turn that one off, just so we can use the third person camera real quick. Let's go ahead and pop this up in here. So now if I hit play, it should pop up this little window, and you can see now we have this third person camera where it's set up at here. We've also got the third person in the map, because we did that and we didn't really need to do that. So what that actually is, by the way, is the, see, that's why. So we have a network player start, and we don't want that. In fact, there's some things we'll probably want to get rid of before we get too far into other stuff. As far as this, that's fine, but we'll be doing some other stuff later on. So now when we hit play, it drops us wherever we're at. Let's just do a player start. Drop that into here. Now when we hit play there, it's always going to start us there. That's what we want. Okay. So notice we haven't touched the player character. We've only touched the parent, right? So now that we have all of these set up, though, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to actually remove the mesh, because we don't need the mesh for the parent. So we'll compile and save that. We only need the mesh in the child. We'll open the full editor here, go to our viewport, go to the mesh, and now we can select our mannequin mesh. And you can see everything sockets right back to where it's supposed to be, which is exactly what we wanted to do. Now we can also do an override in here if we want. So if we want this one to be the auto activate, and we turn off the auto activate on that one, compile and play. Now we have this first person view, which you can't really tell because we can't move the camera around. That's kind of part of the reason that I had this set up the other way around to begin with, which is what we'll do. All right, so save that. I'm going to go into my project settings real quick, and we are going to go to input on the left here. So you can see there's lots of inputs already in here, and a lot of that is because the first person template, which is part of the reason I start with that. So I'm going to go ahead and clear any VR stuff because we don't need any VR stuff. 5 mixed reality. Okay, let's go. All that good stuff. So now we have gamepad left thumb axis is going to move us forward and back. Up and down, we don't really want that. We do want W and S for our keyboard controls. So this gives us keyboard and gamepad control. A and D for the move left and right, and gamepad left access. Everything else can go. And then our turn rate is going to be gamepad access there, and we can close those out. And then we're going to have our mouse X as our turn for the mouse there. The look up is of course going to be that, and the look up for the mouse is going to be that as well. And the reason these are different is because this is a lookup rate, so depending on how far up you're pressing on the joystick, that's the rate that you're looking up or down, versus this is just navigated to the mouse Y. So you know, if I move it this far, it's going to look up that far, right? So that's kind of how that works. So what we're going to want to do is we're actually going to want to jump into this first person blueprint, and we're going to want to open this first person character up. And you can see in the event graph we have a few different things. We'll go ahead and just get rid of, again, the VR stuff. But what we do want to do, let's see here, we'll be changing some of that. What we do want to do is we want to actually copy all of this, take it over to our parent actor, BP human, because this is going to be inherited on every character that we make, essentially, right? Every player character that we make, or every human player character in this case. So we're going to go ahead and just paste all that in here. So I'm going to actually rename this comment to gamepad input. I also prefer to have things capitalized because I'm psychotic that way. And then we're going to make some changes here because we don't need to care if there's a head-mounted display. So if a head-mounted display is true, we don't need this at all. So we can actually plug that directly into world direction. Fairly certain I am doing that correctly. We are going to find out here in just a moment. And so now we can rename this. I'll go ahead and rename it up here. So movement input. Oh no, what just happened? Okay, well. Yeah, movement input. There we go. And then we have mouse input's going to stay the same, and then our jump is going to stay the same as well. So this might change a little bit, but that's fine. So we'll compile this, we'll save this. So these are, right, we don't have the variables set up to actually make these work. So let's go ahead and set those variables up. So we're going to go ahead and add a variable, and it's going to be called base lookup rate. Going to be a float. So now if we do another variable and we do base turn rate, it should automatically assign itself to that. Indeed it does. Okay, now to get those values, we'll come over here. We've got a 45 degree in the turn rate, 45 on the look up as well. So we'll make those defaults here on the right. And then I think that's pretty much all they need for that. So we should be able to compile this, save this, and I think if we hit play now, we should actually have some control. So we can look left and right, we can move back and forth. Yeah, this was the one that we needed to set. So wasn't quite sure which one we needed to go. So the camera needs to use pawn control rotation. And then we should be able to look up and down now, yeah. And we've got our motions, and we can jump. And he jumps terribly, but... And of course, we don't have any animations set up in there yet. So let's go ahead and do that as well. Now, because we're doing our... player character specifically, we're not going to set the animation in the parent. We're going to set the animation in here. So we'll do the anim class. I'm going to go ahead and set up the, see what they call it here. UE4 ASP Hero TTP Anim Blueprint. And there you go. So now he's got animations there. So now if we play this, you can see he actually moves around somewhat accurately. A bunch of these animations look like junk, but you know, they are what they are. Okay, so another thing you can see that they have in here is spawn projectile and all that. We'll be setting up our own stuff, so I'm not really too concerned about that. A lot of this may be very similar, but that's not really important. They do have a construction script as well, and this essentially attaches a component to a component, because you can see that they have a skeletal mesh component here, and that's somewhat similar to what we're going to be doing, but we're actually going to be right-clicking on this, and we're going to, left-clicking and selecting, we're going to add a child actor to it, and we're going to call that weapon. And then the nice thing about that is that we can change that to any actor that we want. We wouldn't really do that in the parent, though. We would do it in the child. So the cool thing, when you look at the child, you can see there's, and not in the Mandalorian sense, you can see that there's nothing in this event graph, yet it inherits all of those motions that we've put into here, and that's kind of the main reason that we did that. Is because then we can go in and specifically put anything that we need in this very specific character without having to actually mess with everybody overall, right? Anything we want to do and apply to every, in this case, human character that we make, we would want to put that in here. And then any specifics we would put in the specific child actor itself. And it gets to essentially either override things or make additions based on all of that. So what we're going to do, actually needed to socket that to a weapon socket. So we're going to bring in our character mesh again. And then we can come in here and we can socket that to, oh, we don't have a weapon socket made. We'll have to do that. I am getting ahead of myself, that is for sure. We're gonna open the skeleton up of our mesh. One of the easiest ways to do that is just to come here and browse for it, and then we can open it up. I could have just opened the skeleton directly, but that's fine. So we'll come to the skeleton tree. So we want the right hand. It's gonna be, there's hand L, there's hand R. I believe that's where we want that, so we're going to add a socket. Yeah, that's correct. And we're going to call that weapon. So, or not. Weapon socket. So now when we are in here, we should be able to find that. Now when we do, oops, we can search for weapon. There we go. So whatever weapon we end up having in here, it will socket directly to that. And we don't have any weapons in here yet, but that's going to be its own thing. We are eventually going to want to make sure that we have some sort of a socket or something on the left hand as well for eye case. We can always make sure that it's connected to the rifle as well, but that's its own sort of thing. We'll get to that much later on. All right, so we are running pretty damn long on this video, so I think I'm going to end it there. We've made some progress. We've got a lot of things set up, and we're going to basically move on from here. He doesn't have his jump animation. That's kind of strange. I'll have to look into the animation graph on that, but again, that's me being picky about animations. So that's going to end it for me today. Stay tuned. I'm going to come up with another one really quickly after this, just because I am going to continue importing all my stuff and getting my work actually into the new version of the engine, and that's going to be a big deal. So thank you for watching. I know this was really long, really convoluted, a lot of stuff going on. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Also, if you have any suggestions for either how I can make my content better, or to any content that you want to see, if you want me to go into more detail on any of the specifics in Unreal Engine, or if you have any questions on how to do anything specifically in Unreal Engine. I'm by no means an expert, but I am quite good and quite versed in Unreal Engine. I've been using it for quite a while now, and have been using a lot of things, coming up with my own ideas, and stealing other people's ideas, which is always a useful learning tactic as well. So there's definitely some things I could help out if you need it. So just let me know. All right, until next time.